Yo, what's good? Welcome into the show. You're watching Philadelphia Eagles Now by Chat Sports. I am your fearless leader, Chase Sr., no matter where you are, how you're tuned in. We appreciate all of you for making today's show a part of your day. As for what we're getting into, some post-June 1 trade targets for Philadelphia. Players who could get dealt by other teams, who could be of interest for Howie Roseman to bring on this roster to chase that Super Bowl. A couple of these players of the blockbuster variety, a couple of these players could really help this team on both sides of the rock. And we start off with today's poll question, which is this. You think of some of the trade candidates when you canvass the league and look at the other 31 teams in the NFL. And which name comes to mind as your dream Eagles trade target? I want everybody watching right now to share that name with me down below in the comment section. We might include that player in a future video. Post-June 1 trade target number 1. And obviously, we're talking about these post-June 1 trade targets because a lot of teams have freed up cap space. They've gained cap space in Philadelphia. They're still sitting pretty with their cap space, $25 million at their disposal. And I want to begin with Budda Baker, a player who we've talked about on the show a couple of times here. The Eagles so far at OTAs and at minicamp with their first-string safety tandem, it's been CJ Gardner-Johnson and Reed Blankenship. As for some players notably getting backup reps, that includes Avonte Maddox, who historically with Philadelphia has been a slot nickel corner, and James Bradberry, who was awful on the outside as a corner last year. And even though at the NFL Scouting Combine, when we were there and we asked Howie Roseman about the future of Bradberry, of whether or not he was going to be on this team and what position he could play, Howie at the time said that Bradberry, strictly an outside corner, but clearly the Eagles have changed their opinions of Bradberry and where they might be able to use him because he's getting slot nickel reps, he's getting safety reps. Sidney Brown right now, a player who I think has a lot of promise. He's recovering from a torn ACL, so he's not yet participating in these OTA or minicamp practices. And with that, I pose this question. What do you think a Budda Baker trade would do? What I think it would accomplish for Philadelphia, a couple of things here. It makes you better in the secondary. This is a player who you can use all around the secondary. Budda Baker is on an expiring deal, and he's a very accomplished player who's been in the NFL for 7 years. And in 6 of those 7 seasons, he has been named either to an all-pro team or he has been named as a Pro Bowler. And Arizona is still in this phase right now where they are rebuilding. So instead of letting one of their franchise icons walk for nothing, do they elect to trade him to get some value back? Trade target number 2 post-June 1. Baltimore Ravens wide receiver Rashod Bateman. If Philadelphia is not convinced that John Ross, Paris Campbell, Anaya Smith, Britton Covey, Joseph Nagata can be their wide receiver 3, do you decide to target a player who up to this point, since being a first-round pick a few years ago, has been a little bit of a disappointment? You put him into your player development factory, and you're banking on the fact that you'd be able to turn Rashod Bateman into a solid player, a good complementary wideout at that wide receiver 3 spot, and you can maximize the player here. Now, there's no question that the first 3 years of his career have been disappointing. He has not surpassed 400 receiving yards in the last 2 years. The Ravens did sign him to a contract extension, but it is very, very affordable. $5 million over the next 3 years, that's actually a good bargain for wide receiver 3 money. In Bateman's first 3 years, as a rookie, he comes out 46 catches, 515 yards, and a touchdown in 12 games played. In 2022, he only plays 6 games, only has 15 catches, 285 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And then last year, he was able to play 16 games, so his first full season pretty much at the NFL level, and he set a career high for catches, not for yards though, because the yards only at 367 and still only 1 touchdown. A buy low, potential high upside trade target for the Eagles here. Trade target number 3, Miles Sanders, the former Eagle who's currently a running back with the Carolina Panthers. And last week we talked about signing Miles Sanders if he were to be a post-June 1 cut by the Carolina Panthers. As of right now, he has not been let go, but could the Panthers look to deal him away? In 2022 with Philadelphia, in the final year of his contract, en route to the Birds making it to the Super Bowl, winning the NFC, he put together the first 1,000-yard rushing season for an Eagles running back since LaShawn McCoy all the way back in 2014. He parlays that into a monster contract with Carolina for the running back market and what it was at the time, but he struggled in a terrible offense last year with the Panthers. And I think that the Panthers' actions speak loudly here. They signed Sanders to a multi-year deal, yet in the second round, with the new regime as far as the coaching staff, they took Jonathan Brooks, the Texas running back, coming off a torn ACL in the second round of the draft. So clearly they look at Brooks as the number one running back in the future for Carolina. Last 4 years for Sanders, his Eagles career was certainly an up and down one, where he was a very, very productive player who up until the final year of his rookie contract never surpassed 1,000 yards. But again, no Eagle running back had done that since LaShawn McCoy. And his career in Philadelphia kind of marred by injuries, inconsistent play. Sometimes he'd have to deal with some nicks and knacks, so he wasn't able to really fully display what he's capable of doing. What he did consistently do, though, is pull off some splash plays and a couple of really good moments. And then finally in 2022, he did put it all together. And he did have a career year. And he did stay healthy. And he was very consistent. Top 5 among all running backs in rushing yards with nearly 1,300. And he found pay dirt 11 times. But last year, the numbers, not good at all. 3.3 yards per carry, 129 totes for only 432 yards. He only found the end zone one time. Let's go to the defensive side of the ball once again with Tremaine Edmunds, the linebacker for the Chicago Bears, who was a big disappointment in the Windy City last year. In the 2023 offseason, he got a bag from Chicago. He signed a 4-year, $72 million contract. To be real, he didn't live up to that. In fact, he was outshined by another linebacker who the Bears signed in that same free agency period, a player who a lot of you know very well, TJ Edwards, a former UDFA out of Wisconsin, who ended up making the roster year one as a roster fringe player and special teamer. He developed into a very, very good linebacker for the Eagles, and then he got some decent coin from Chicago. And while we're talking about some of these players on this list, by the way, I think I mentioned earlier the Eagles had $25 million in cap space. After June 1, that number has actually gone up to $27.4 million. So they can afford to pay some of the players who we're talking about on today's show. I wasn't lying when I said that Edmunds really struggled last year. Overall Pro Football Focus grade of 56.5, a run defense grade of 57.5, a pass rush grade of 42.5, a coverage grade of 58.3, and when he was targeted in coverage, he gave up a passer rating of 103 flat. At number 5, and we're halfway through our list here with 5 more players to go, Bengals wide receiver T. Higgins. He asked to be traded. He has not been dealt, obviously, by Cincinnati. Is he going to hold out from mandatory minicamp as well as training camp? That is a storyline that we will continue to monitor. This is a move that the Eagles would make if they just want to say, you know what, F it, let's go all in. And let's run out a wide receiver trio that could be one of the best of all time and one of the scariest that we've ever seen. And A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and T. Higgins. That would simply be ridiculous. The Bengals have not extended him. I think he certainly deserves it because he's a great complementary wide receiver to Jamar Chase. You want to do everything that you can to put weapons around your quarterback, who's a franchise guy like Joe Burrow is. And even though Higgins has requested a trade, that has not been fulfilled by Cincinnati. Last 4 years for Higgins, he has been a highly productive player. 2020, 67 grabs, 908 yards, and 6 touchdowns. That's really when he started to turn some heads across the NFL. In 2021, career year for him, 74 catches, almost 1,100 yards, and 6 touchdowns. In 2022, he was great once again. Still 74 catches once again. Yards per catch goes down a little bit. Touchdowns go up by 1. And even though last year he missed 5 games, still very productive. career high in yards per catch, 42 grabs, 656 yards, and 5 touchdowns. And if Howie were to make this move, this is basically the translation of it. Thug life, savage Howie Roseman with the glasses, the cigarette in, a couple of chains with the cornrows, because I think that he would break the minds of a lot of people across the National Football League. Before we continue to move forward on today's post-June 1 trade targets video, don't forget to subscribe to us here on Eagles Now, the largest independently run Eagles channel right here on YouTube. Whenever the Eagles make a move, whenever there's some buzz, there's juice, there's a rumor out there, we dissect it, we break it down, go Birds, and hit that sub button. These brotherly shove shirts, first of all, the design, phenomenal. I had to get one for myself. I rocked it the other day when I was on a run in Dallas. A lot of people were looking at me weird. You know what I did? I said, go Birds. On sale right now for just $22. Chatsports.com/brotherly shove. You have the X's and O's. Jalen Hurts going right up the gut, squatting 500, 600 pounds on his way to the paint. Let's go through our other trade targets here. Courtland Sutton, wide receiver for the Denver Broncos. He, like a lot of these other players on this list, is looking for a new contract extension. Broncos head coach Sean Payton thinks that Sutton will report to mandatory minicamp, but that is not a sure thing as of right now. The Broncos quarterback situation in an interesting spot. They traded for Zach Wilson. They drafted Bo Nix very, very high. Sean Payton clearly likes Bo Nix a lot if they were to draft him that high, but if you're Sutton, you're looking for a bag. You're just looking for some consistent quarterback play because he hasn't been able to have that in a little while. And because of that, that's why the production has dipped a little bit. Still been a productive player, but probably not as great as it could be if Sutton were to pair up with a really good QB. Last year in 2023, 59 grabs, 772 yards, and 10 touchdowns. So this is a player that despite the yards being down, the touchdowns last year were certainly up. I don't think he's a number one. I do think that he's a really solid number 2 or number 3 on a playoff contending team. We remain at wide receiver with Skyy Moore of the Kansas City Chiefs. Why do I know that name? A lot of you might be asking yourselves that question. I didn't want to do this, but I had to do it because this was my first thought when I thought about the name Skyy Moore, and that is his touchdown against the Philadelphia Eagles in Super Bowl 57 in Glendale, Arizona, when the Eagles got fooled not once, but twice on kind of that pre-snap motion play. Skyy Moore on one side, Kadarius Toney on another side, and the Eagles defense, led by Jonathan Gannon, who was awful in that second half, did not make any adjustments. They were completely schooled on that same play call, that same wrinkle. Skyy Moore is a player who, I'm not going to say he's on the roster bubble, but what are his opportunities going to be because of what the Chiefs have done at that wide receiver position? 2 drafts ago, they drafted Rashee Rice out of SMU. Legal situation pending. We'll see what happens with that. Marquise Brown, they signed him in free agency, otherwise known as Hollywood Brown, and then they drafted Xavier Worthy in the first round. So they have picked up a couple of players in Brown and Worthy who are 4'2", 4'3" speedsters, and that's just so lethal and dangerous for quarterback Patrick Mahomes. Skyy Moore had a disappointing year last year, up and down as far as his availability and definitely his production, as the Chiefs' wide receiving core just was not good, and Patrick Mahomes still able to win a Super Bowl. It's ridiculous. 21 catches, 244 yards, a touchdown along a 54. The production really not there. Could he be looking for a change of scenery? And is the writing on the wall that he could get dealt given what the Chiefs have done at the wide receiver position? A blockbuster trade once again where Howie Roseman would go straight thug life on these fools. Davante Adams of the Las Vegas Raiders. Recently, he was on his teammate's podcast, Max Crosby, and this is what he said about leaving the Green Bay Packers. I don't regret what I did, but at the same time, it's definitely, you look back on it like, damn, that boy Jordan Love, he's kind of balling right now. That's interesting. I kind of sense regret. And Davante Adams, you could go from a garbage organization that never wins any big games, rarely makes it to the playoffs, rarely has any sustained success, to an elite one in Philadelphia. And the same talking point can be made for Davante Adams that we discussed with T. Higgins. You want to go all in, put your nuts on the table, say F it, and you want to have one of the best wide receiving cores ever? A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Davante Adams. Even though he has had bad quarterback play and inconsistent quarterback play the last 2 years with the Raiders, his production has still been very, very good. We're talking about a player who's caught 203 balls over the last 2 years for just an insane amount of yards and is still combined for bad offenses for 21 touchdowns the last 2 years. A great route runner, precise footwork, great hands, and has everything to his route tree. Once again, we cue up this photo. Howie Roseman is savage if he pulls off a trade for one of these blockbuster players. Coming in at number 9 is Matthew Judon, the edge rusher for the New England Patriots. He did not attend Patriots OTAs with the post-Bill Belichick era underway, and he skipped those OTAs because he's looking for a new deal. He is a 31-year-old edge rusher who's coming off a biceps tear, but this is a player who's been able to age really well, and in fact, as he's gotten older, he's kind of gotten better. He's been a very durable player throughout his career. Unfortunately for last year, a biceps tear can sometimes be a fluky injury, but he was off to a tremendous start. We saw what he was able to do against Philadelphia in week 1. 4 sacks and 9 quarterback hits in 4 games. Season before that, he racked up 15.5 sacks. Before that, 12.5. And then with the Ravens back in 2020, 6 sacks and 21 quarterback hits. Coming in at number 10 is not a player who the Eagles could trade for, but a player who the Eagles could trade themselves. So let me switch it up on y'all, and it's James Bradberry, a player who the Eagles could deal away. And I was going through some Bradberry numbers, especially after Nick Sirianni had said that he's going to get some safety and nickel corner reps. And I wanted to compare his 2022 numbers when he was excellent to his 2023 production where he was just awful. And my goodness, did he fall off a cliff. As I've said here on the show, it is difficult to gauge how bad individual players were last year because the scheme was so terrible. But the eye test told us that Bradberry was lost. Overall Pro Football Focus grade in 2022 of 74.1. He had a coverage grade of 80.2. A passer rating allowed when targeted of just 54.2. He had 3 picks, and that came on 675 coverage snaps. He was one of the highest graded corners in the entire NFL. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about a player in Bradberry who in 2022 was a second-team All-Pro. He got cooked and washed overnight because in 2023, the numbers on the right side of your screen, overall Pro Football Focus grade down to 56.6, coverage grade down to 54.7, passer rating doubled to 108.6 when targeted, only had 1 pick. I look at interceptions as sacks. It's not the full tell as far as how good a player is, and the coverage snaps last year went up for James Bradberry, and the missed tackle rate was also an issue. Cover your eyes. I know that you already looked at some of those numbers, but the point here being not good at all. If you enjoyed today's show, you were informed, you hung around until the end, I want you to type Real One down below in the comment section. As you venture down there, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for daily and year-round coverage on the EAGLES.